Hey, it's Andy here. Welcome to the workshop. So you can see here now we have the visualization and we have the material, the bit, and I'm going to talk about the bits quickly as well. Bit selection, we talked a little bit about end mills earlier in the course where the different sizes, the different shapes will change depending on what type of projects you want to do. In this case, we're basically doing a 2D shape that we just cut all the way through. What we'll stick with is using a flat end mill. So this bit is specifically a downcut 1/8 inch end mill. And there's a couple of reasons I picked this one. The first reason is because as it cuts, because of the shape of the end mill, it draws the chips down. Because material like this, plywood and pine, they tend to kind of like shear upwards and leave chips and ragged edges. If you break the chips downwards, it'll help keep the edge more clean. And if you want to go to the further extreme, we also have something called a compression bit, which is basically the bottom half of the end mill is an upcut, so that as it cuts through the bottom layer of the material, it pushes the chips upwards, whereas on the top edge of the material, it's a downcut bit, so then it shears the chips downwards, so you get a smooth edge. Generally speaking, because we're going to mount this material straight to the wasteboard, the chips don't have anywhere to go, so it makes the edge on the bottom cleaner. Compression bits are really popular and they work pretty well too, so feel free to check them out. They are a little bit more expensive. That's sort of the downside. They're harder to make, generally speaking, but I've used them a lot and they work really well. The bigger the end mill is, the more force it takes to cut. Because the end mill is thicker, it can withstand more force because it will bend less. It's like one thing changes the other. The second is that the bigger the bit is, the bigger the cut width is going to be. You can never have like an infinitely small cut. It will always be the width of the knife or bigger. And it's the same with end mills. The bigger the end mill is, the bigger the cut is going to be. In the context of this project, I need the cut to be as small as possible because we have details here where they need to be cut very precise, not precisely, but the details are smaller. When you're cutting a 90-degree inside corner, the radius of the bit is a fillet. So you can't, in a lot of cases where you have an inset cut, you can't cut a perfectly 90-degree edge. With an 1/8 inch bit, your radius is going to be 1/16. And because of the pliability of the material, even if you don't do a relief or like sand them out, in this context of this project, they will still work and they will still fit together because we're going to slot all these parts together and then hammer them together. So it will work fine for this project. Those are some of the considerations I've taken. For general kind of practice, I would suggest for these type of projects to use an 1/8 inch, or even you can go to a 1/16 inch bit. And if you're doing thicker materials like the block that we showed for the work holding demo, you would use a 1/4 inch bit because you're cutting through thicker material. And actually that brings me to the last point, which is the length of the end mill is going to matter as well, because if the end mill is too short, it won't be able to cut all the way through. Generally speaking, the thicker the bit is, the longer it can be. And so in this case, we only need to cut 1/2 inch through, and this bit is long enough. If I were to do like a 1 inch cut, then it would probably be too short. So we may go with a thicker bit in that case. In the context of Easel, Easel is a software made by Inventables, and they sell their own bits. So these default end mills that you can use for the free software are just the ones that they sell on their store. What's most important is the diameter of the end mill. In this case, we're just going to use an 1/8 inch diameter bit because it matches the diameter of the end mill. But if we're using the default settings for the feeds and speeds, they'll probably not match up, but we can change them manually in the software here too. So that's going to be the next thing we're going to talk about.